Welcome to Insurance Technology Amplified, the podcast where we explore how innovation is transforming the insurance industry. This is the place where technology and expertise come together to empower agents, carriers, and the industry alike. Thank you for tuning in. Now, let's get to the show.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the Momentum Amplified podcast. I love how when I say that, I feel like I'm so important, and I'm kidding myself because I don't know who the bloody hell is listening. I say it all the time, but if you're listening, do me a favor, email me, michael@momentumamp.com. Please, I'd love to know who's listening. So our guest today is someone who I know for a very long time, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for. It's Pete Teresi from Certificial. And when you're in an industry as vast and deep as the insurance industry, and you could build something where you become the Band-Aid, Q-tip-esque type brand associated with a workflow, you know that you've accomplished something. I don't know if you've accomplished profitability, and I don't know if you've accomplished unicorn status, but you have accomplished real brand recognition, and Pete at Certificial have done just that. They really have become synonymous with the whole process of certificate management, and that's coming from someone whose company used to be called Now Certs, because we were also pretty strong at certificate management. So really, kudos to you, Pete, and welcome to Momentum Amplified.
Thank you. Appreciate those words.
Pete, take a minute. I'd love for our audience to hear a little bit about your background, what brings you to where we are today.
No, I appreciate it. Well, my whole career has been based off of a technology background. I've worked in the insurance industry for now going on 25 years, maybe even more. But again, I've always wore a technology hat. I think the interesting theme about that I find throughout my career is I've always been involved in what feels like a startup environment. I mean, one of my very first jobs, I started with Microsoft, and you'd think, well, okay, this is a huge organization. How is this anything near a startup? But we were like, it was funny because I tell the story. I was on an interview. I didn't even know I was interviewing for Microsoft. I was interviewing for a company called MSNBC, and I didn't know what the heck that was at the time. Nobody did, because I was like one of the first employees, and we worked out of a trailer in Fort Lee, New Jersey, before, they opened up a big studio in Secaucus. And, during that interview, I learned I'd be working for Microsoft, and it was a joint venture. But it was interesting because even, with those two large organizations, where I worked really felt like a startup. And we brought, some of the very first broadcasting news to streaming online, and, just got to see, some real cool innovation during those years. And continuing that journey on, I worked in the financial district for another startup company, eventually got purchased out, and, made my way into the insurance space again through technology hats, and, landed, as you guys know, I have a long tenure and a long time I've spent working with the Accord. Right. So, that's, I think, where I really started getting hands-on into the business of insurance, listening to agents, brokers, carriers, and just kind of understanding their day-to-day, not just what they needed from a standard perspective, but just operationally what was working, what was not, what keeps them up at night with client retention. And throughout all of that, the certificate of insurance thing just kept coming up left and right. You'd hear about it in a lot of different conversations. I lost a client because my SLAs weren't great with certs, or I want to get rid of a client because they asked for too many certs and I don't make any money on this deal anymore. It's like, I have a huge operations and an entire office dedicated, hundreds of people that do nothing but this. It's a tremendous operational burden. It's, you hear about this and you really look at the process. And what you find is, you keep going downstream past the insurance industry, and it's like, all right, well, is anybody being serviced right in this workflow? Because, you look at the insured, and they're over here playing middle with this process between their clients and their agents. And then you get down into the certificate holders. You start to really look at what goes on in their operations. And it's like, well, the COI exists because they're looking to maintain and know that someone has coverage, but they're getting point-in-time documents. So they're not even achieving what is the entire purpose of the workflow. Is not being achieved, yet everybody is being burdened, operationally challenged, and by this workflow, you have to really, start looking at it and say, this is fundamentally flawed. This is not something we can just say, well, if we fix this or band-aid that, maybe put a little something different over here, we'll make this process valuable. It's not. It's the need for it is real. The abilities in which have been enabled behind it today are archaic and they don't work. And I came into this space going, we should either do away with certs or figure out a way to do it right. I really had that much of a strong opinion on it, and so, that's what led my journey in my career to really, now start Certificial, right? Clearly here I am now as a co-founder and CEO in the organization. And we're very passionate about being innovative, being transformative, and really solving this problem and looking at it end to end. I think that's a really big, just miss on. I understand why it has been that way. People sell technology to certain organizations, certain stakeholder types, and your job and your mission is to service their portion of it. And this is a workflow that spans 3 different stakeholders with different needs. So it's very, it's not to me shocking that there's no one technology that actually spans across the whole thing. But I think we also have to take a step back and realize that's a big reason why this process is fragmented and broken. And so that was one.
I'll use that as an opportunity for a shameless self-promotion.
There you go.
But I do believe in one of the taglines that we're pushing right now is that we think, as of last week, for the first time in history, Momentum has become the only company that has a true end-to-end solution. Where, as you saw, we acquired trustedchoice.com.
Right.
And so now the number one thing that agents want, they ask for referrals and for leads. We deliver that. We've got the policy management in the AMS. We've got the pipeline management in the CRM. Could handle the endorsement, the download, the renewal, the cert. We've got a full, for the first time, I really do believe we are the first company to have a true end-to-end solution. So I had to take that opportunity to say, because it has been a problem in the industry and something that we've been trying to solve for a long time.
And I commend you guys for doing it. And I think some of the ability that enables you to achieve that is your openness and willingness to say that now certs doesn't need to do it all, and Momentum does not need to do it all by themselves, right? You partner with the right individuals, you acquire at times where necessary, you partner, you build into it, right? But you're ultimately creating an ecosystem that provides that experience in the end, however achieved, right? Then but I think that's an important aspect, because I always found, and I think it's, again, I'm optimistic over the last 5 or 6 years. I do see a change in what I'm about to say, but prior to that, I really felt like walls were put up amongst a lot of the systems. The willingness to work together was just not there. Everybody felt like, I can do it myself and I will do it, and I don't need partners in this space. The insurance, all the solutions need to be set up as an ecosystem here. I often use analogies with smartphones. If I only had the apps that came on my phone, it wouldn't be half as powerful as it is. That when you open that up and you allow people to contribute and give them choices and give them the tools they need, your phone becomes so much more powerful. And the insurance market needs to be treated the same way. Every market does.
Well, you're an example that, and you specifically are an example that I talk about all the time when trying to reference the openness that we really strive for. And I always talk about Certificial, saying that, hey, our DNA was cert management. The bloody name of our company was Now Certs.
Right.
But if we think that Certificial could do it better, if we think that Certificial could bring value to our customers and our agents, bring it on. That will only help, and it'll only allow us to improve. So I really do reference you specifically all the time to make that point, because people would think that, okay, we're open, but not in these areas. And your partnership is a testament, really, to the openness.
I will vouch for that, but I do have to ask why we couldn't figure out a way to get rid of certificates completely. Get rid of them completely or fix them. We couldn't figure out how to get rid of them completely.
Well, it's interesting because you actually, you bring up a good point, right? When we were kind of prototyping and designing, and literally at the whiteboard, right? I actually have a photo of just a whiteboard with stickies on it, this day one this project started, right? Awesome. And when we were thinking about this, we did remove the certificate of insurance from it because, it's important to, if you're literally going to take a step back and go to the whiteboard, then, start at ground zero, right? And, and then realize what needs to be there and, versus, what are you supporting just for the purpose of legacy, transactions. And when you build a data first experience throughout this, what we realize is that the form itself no longer becomes a problem.
Yep.
Right? Because it actually ends up being only what it was ever intended for. And that is a print version rendering of a point in time, right? So if you do need to take it out of the network, out of the system, well, there's a great way to do it, right? If I want to hang it up on the refrigerator or whatever possible thing you'd want to do with the paper version of a COI, auto ID cards in your car, but we're getting a little off the commercial line when we do that. But nonetheless, when it's a data driven, and that's what we enable, we call smart COIs in the Certificial network, because they continuously version out and are always a representation of the data as it is at current moment. When we use a cert as a means for data transmission, a document, any document for data transmission, it could be a COI, it could be a Word document, it could be an Excel file. When you start to use documents to have system to system communication, because that's what the COI is also being used for, that's where the problems come in. And that's where the cert becomes, you look at it as the problem. The problem is we're using archaic communication channels between our systems, right? And documents included.
That's a great point. So my DNA has been on the rating side, right? Which is different, but similar in a way that people have these Accord applications, right? And we're going like, we want to get rid of applications. And it's not you want to get rid of the application. You want to get rid of that PDF as the primary form of delivery of that data, right? Like the data stays. Data is important, but like passing. I mean, we had systems where, and I shouldn't say we, like the whole industry. When I say we, is we've got systems that takes PDFs, scrapes them, puts it into data, and then puts it back into a PDF. Like what a waste of energy. Like just in that whole process, right? Like just keep the data. That's important.
Right.
But the idea of moving the industry away from the PDF standard as a way of data transmission is an issue. Right?
You're right. And realize that the exact workflow you described is COIs. Before it's a COI, what is it in Momentum? It's data.
Yep.
So we're taking data to create a PDF to communicate it so somebody else can OCR it back into data. It starts as data, it ends up as data. We're using documents as data transmission.
You talk about getting rid of the COI, Pete, I could imagine, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago when blockchain started becoming a thing in shared ledger. I would imagine that at some moment it was like, oh, this could be interesting. If there were this shared ledger for the certificate that actually was, some real-time piece of information that this insured does have a policy, is covered. I would imagine, if I were in the business, blockchain would have been a use case that I explored. I don't think it's taken off the way that any of us, thought or, got the adoption, but.
Well, Mike, whether you use, blockchain or any other technology stack to be the enablement of it, in order for it to still function and have value, it still needs to be a data-driven process. If you just take a COI and drop it on the blockchain network, it's like maybe you can validate its source. So you can say, possibly you can rule out fraud potentially. But nonetheless, as far as the currency and the accuracy of that document day after day, it needs to have a data relationship back to the source in order to say that it continues to be valid. You're constantly checking a data source because a document is a document at the end of the day, Right. So blockchain or whatever, we need to move to a data-driven process, choose your technology stack. But your technology stack doesn't solve your problems. It just enables the solution. You got to have the right solution in place.
So if you had to distill Certificial down to a tweet.
God, I've been trying to do that for 7 years.
Yeah, I know. It's a challenge, but maybe not a tweet, but, really trying to reach, the audience and really just communicating to the independent agent channel. Like for those who don't know Certificial, what do you do? What's your superpower?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go and try and give the tweet version, right? Because at the heart and soul of what we do, we're connecting the insurance industry with all of the verticals. I don't care if it's commercial property, commercial transportation, construction, you name it, right? And that's what the Certificial network does. And that's why we identify when you look at our marketing, we call ourselves a network because that's exactly what we are. On either side of Certificial are systems. You have Momentum, would be the left side of the network representing of the insurance industry. And on the right side, we just did a partner announcement last week. You'll see a bunch of, the solutions that ultimately where these COIs are ended up in. We're integrated with those systems and we're connecting them so they can digitally speak to each other and not rely on the email and all the archaic communication channels we just spoke about. So, our main mission is that, right? We're connecting the insurance industry with all the other verticals so that we can have a bi-directional, transparent experience as it becomes to insurance verification. Because as much as every other vertical outside of insurance wants insurance data, well, guess what? I want all those structured requirements coming back into the insurance industry because that's valuable data for us. And we lack it today. You talk to your average agent and say, does your client carry enough insurance? I would say, and how do you know? Because unless you're reading every MSA they sign and intimately involved in their day-to-day workload, you don't know what their real risks are. It's in those agreements, but you know what? It's actually in those systems. And we're integrated on both sides to bring all of that data together. So to your point, how does that help an independent agent? Well, it does three key things that's Certificial that we really, really strive to in the independent agent channel. One is, again, as I just stated, is to make this a very seamless data-driven process so that they have better insights into their clients' information. They can better serve their customers first and foremost. Second is the operational and the automation. We may or may not have time or get into some of what we do in automation, but I can tell you right now, we have completely automated this process from end to end, from request to receive of COI, hands off keyboard, right? That's operational efficiency. I never want another agent story again saying they're thinking of dropping a client because they asked for too many certs. That's just screams a lack of technology ability, if that's the reason why you're dropping.
What percentage of agents do you feel are leveraging just in the world of certs, are leveraging best in class, best in practice technology, whether it's you or some of the other, based upon your travels? Is it 1 in 10? Is it 2 in 10? What would you say are really leveraging best in class cert management?
I'd actually say the number's kind of high, to tell you the truth. I would say it's closer to 6, 7, out of 10 that are. I think the challenge is when you get into a smaller agency, you can't bury your losses and operations as much as you could potentially do it in a very large organization, right? If I've got a handful of clients that are causing me a lot of pain in certs, but I'm, dealing with a book of business of hundreds of thousands of folks, you'll make that up in other ways, right? You'll get another, 1,000 clients over here who don't ask for a lot of COIs, and it kind of evens itself out. But if you're, a smaller agent in commercial lines, and you have, 1,000 customers in total and 200 more are pain points, they may be completely hurting, your commissions at the end of the day. So it becomes a different kind of problem. I don't think the large organization should bury it either. It's a problem no matter what. When you get down into the numbers, loss is a loss. How it's exposed, seen, and felt, is what differs. But I think that's one of the main reasons why, and what we probably will get into our business model today, but through our partnership, the way we've deployed Certificial and the way we position in the market is that we're not trying to sell it to insurance agents. We're giving it to insurance agents because I think a big reason why that number is not 10 today is because not everybody can invest into all that technology. You have to have the funding to be able to do that. And I honestly don't believe that cert issuance is one more thing that agents should be funding at this point. I want to give them the technology because when they're equipped with the right tools, there's enough downstream benefits to the other stakeholders, and we do monetize and we are funded by the partners, by the requester side of our network, so that we can build our technology, we can empower those agents, and we can make sure they got the best in class technology in their hands, regardless of whether their budgets allow for it or not.
So let's talk about that for a minute. It's actually one of the notes that I wrote down, and I'm always kind of learning your business model and the nuance of it. But the fact that you do give it away for free to the independent agent is very much parallel with kind of our approach, where you're right, the small independent agent can't afford to make these investments in technology, which is why we're partnering with the Certificials of the world, and we're making these investments to democratize it. And we'll make that investment once, and then give it out to all the independent agents that are our customers on a rinse, repeat, recycle. But talk about, okay, it's free, but now they're specifically Momentum users. How do they benefit? Like, what does the integration look like? What is the setup structure? How does it work?
Yeah. So, I always say this to folks, like whether it be Momentum or any other, software platform out there that's enabling the creation of COIs, right? We can talk about feature to feature comparisons and what's quicker and what has a higher level of automation. But I think the real value and the differentiating factor and what makes our partnership so great is that we extend all the way into the vendor management systems. And with that, you're able to create a level of automation that without it, it will never exist. If we're not looking at some end to end, quite honestly, then all these technologies are PDF creators. And you're still going to have to deal with the distribution of that information and the updates and the continuation. And, what we're doing here is by creating that ecosystem that allows to connect Momentum to every other vendor management solution out there. Not only is it the data sharing aspect that we talked about earlier, but the ability for agents and brokers to have a level of automation that otherwise cannot be achieved. One of our agents on Momentum, we've got some use cases out there or case studies out there we can take a look at, right? But they receive thousands and thousands of requests for insurance from some of these vendors that vendor management systems that are connected with us. And when those requests come in, because that's a trusted source for them and they know who that is and they have a standard way for responding to those, we set that stuff up. That right now, when those requests come in, they're automatically responded to. Everybody, that driver, in this case, because I'm talking about commercial transportation who needs to get on the road, instantaneous. They register to do business, the request is raised, the data is back and the COI is back in seconds. And nobody's touching a keyboard. And it's continuously up to date, down to the second for the life cycle of that business. That gives the cert holder the ability to actually know when that driver's on the road, that they're protected. And it gives the automation and the service to the client, to get about the client's experience in that. They're never leaving that Momentum agency, right? That's the experience I have, from working with that. I mean, we started this conversation talking about how every single stakeholder is not being serviced well in this process. And I just gave you an example of every stakeholder is benefiting tremendously when done right. And honestly, Michael, when we talk about that, that partner ecosystem, there's no way I can or would do this without partners like Momentum. And I cannot do it without partners that we have listed like Truckstop and DAT on the receiving side of this. The network, is as good as the ecosystem around it. And we have, it's when you bring those parties together that the real value is seen. Certificial as a standalone solution is no better than anything else in the market.
Adam, I want to give you a chance to weigh in.
I think it's, because insurance is a weird product, right? Because you don't feel it, you don't touch it. But I think certificates is a way that agents anyway, really do feel it, and insureds feel that on a daily basis, or maybe not daily, but close to it, right? Mm-hmm. And so streamlining that process and having that so streamlined, I think is huge, right? Because it gives some validity. I shouldn't say validity. Tangibility is a better word. It gives tangibility to the insurance product itself. And so the way you guys are doing that, I think has been really, really impressive.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
What would you say the reasons why? So if you estimated before that 6 out of 10 are availing themselves of whether it's your tech or other real cutting edge COI tech, the 4 out of 10 who aren't, how come? Why not?
It's a good question. I think there's a very, very small percentage. I've worked with some agents and some, specifically maybe in aviation, to throw out like a particular area where there's just not a lot of great products that can even service up COIs or service up some of the types of these specialty lines of business. And they find themselves managing things in different ways. Like they just feel like no system was designed for me, I think that's a very, very small percentage though, but it exists. I mean, I speak to agents who have this challenge and as a result, actually just actually use us a little as a standalone on the insurance side. because we have agents all the time that come to us that actually don't have a management system. I mean, we had a number of these, in the past month join the platform that are manually putting data in the system. Like we almost become their repository for these policies, at least for when it comes to certs, because they don't have a management system. And I think, outside of the specialty lines, I think what we find is just very, very small agencies who just haven't really just felt like they needed a management system and they can do it the old school way. I'm not of that mindset personally. I think everyone can benefit from a management system. I think there's enough in the market today that make it far affordable that anybody with any book of business worth managing is going to be able to afford. So I don't know if it's a good reason, but yeah, and that's what I see. I think
Do you feel that certain agents take the approach, oh, I'm not Brown and Brown, I'm not this massive behemoth, probably not for me, I'm going to keep doing it the way that I always did it. Do you find that that's a reality?
It is a reality, but I don't think I don't
think it should be, but the question is it?
It is, but it's not one that keeps me up at night, because if it was 10, 15 years ago, I think that mindset could live on for another 10, 15 because it does today, right? But I don't think today it can live on for another 10 or 15. I really do not. I think things are changing. And I don't know if those guys will be able to maintain a book of business if they're running an organization like that in the years to come. I don't know that companies are going to be willing to accept static COIs 5-6 years from now. You know what I mean? I really don't. So and quite honestly, anybody building a book of business, let's face it, at some point you want to sell it. You're going to want to, push out of the business. And if that's how you're running your shop, I mean, you're just devaluing your company on a day-to-day basis by running it that way. So
what does keep you up at night?
Before you become Blockbuster.
Yeah, right. But there, when you're looking at kind of agencies and that have specific industry focuses, you kind of mentioned aviation maybe being a tricky one, but are there other ones maybe? And probably trucking is a good one, right? With a lot of certificate management. Are there certain industries, if I'm an agent just listening to this, like we can really help with trucking, we can really help with construction, right? And maybe those two are pretty obvious, but are there other industries that maybe niches that agents have that you guys really have kind of found a unique value prop for?
Yeah, property.
Yeah,
Property is as complex as any of them, and it's you get into. It's really when you start getting into schedules, construction, be dealing with a lot of inland marine schedules and equipment schedules, right? And you get into commercial transportation, it becomes all about the vehicle schedules, the property schedules, right? And then, in each of those categories, you keep peeling the onion, it goes deeper and deeper. We're building all sorts of ways of getting to more granular, important data as well. One of the reasons why there's so much back and forth is because a COI doesn't tell you everything you need to know. We were having this conversation earlier today. If somebody's got reefer breakdown, does it tell you everything you need to know? Because there's exclusions in that document that tell you whether they can actually carry, produce and meat and, what state lines they can cross. You're not going to find that on the COI, So
well, let's be clear. Half the audience reefer means refrigerator, and half the audience reefer means weed. I think you were talking about refrigeration, right?
Yeah, in this case,
exclusions for both, right? I guess
it should be refrigerated at times too. So, but yeah, no, you're right. That's what I'm referring to.
So is that where you guys are going and kind of taking to that next step where it's like, yes, they have coverage, but no, they do not have coverage if they're going into Arizona with produce, right, or whatever. I mean, kind of taking it to that next granular step down, because you're right. I mean, the standard certificate of insurance is, yes, they have a policy and here's the policy number and here's the limit, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot of information on there, but is that where you guys kind of try to take that?
Oh, we are indeed. Yeah. We have a number of technology in place right now. And this honestly is where the AI components start to come into our technology, because creating the data-driven ecosystem is not an AI thing. You have to have that. Right. But if you're going to have modules and you're going to have AI intelligence, it needs to be fed. And the data ecosystem is what will continue to feed those models and empower them to actually, take on additional, what would normally be manual processing, like reading through an endorsement document and finding an important exclusion based on the type of work that's being done. That today is not in a data format. So it's a hard nut to crack until, carriers start, changing the way they're producing these documents. We'll get there, right? Crawl, walk, run. There's no light switch moment here where we go from static COIs to perfect everything, right? Like, we can check everything from, exclusions, and that's why we take the approach we do. Where are the biggest problems today? Biggest problems today in the operations of agents and brokers. They're feeling the pain. Biggest problems today is insurers need to get to work. Certificate holders need to have a better level of confidence that people are maintaining insurance throughout the life cycles. Let's solve these problems. We're seeing it so much right now. When you build this ecosystem and you have this network in place, what we can build upon it, what we can do to enable an innovation above and beyond that for all is tremendous. This is a starting point. It's by nowhere near the end result. But yes, getting into all of that information and more downstream, I think is going to be very, very important. And I think we'll get a lot more participation, carriers included.
Yeah. You mentioned before about a truck crossing state lines into Arizona, and I'm just, my mind is racing about, a future state where you have all the telematic devices that are happening in real time, where all of a sudden, if the second the truck drives into Arizona, somebody gets an alert that says, hey, your cargo, your content, your truck, whatever it is now not covered. And it'll all come together. There will be this moment of singularity, we call it. Is there anybody that subscribes to the don't ask, don't tell, where I don't want to know, it's almost too much information. This is what I'm required to ask. This is what I'm required to know. Don't be too smart. Don't give me too much information. I don't want to know because now I'm liable.
I know. I've had the thought myself. In certain cases, you do have to be careful, right? You can't play ignorance when it's staring you dead in the face on a day-to-day basis, and you have that, right? It does become a responsibility as a result. So, I'm certain that exists. I'm sure folks will want to do that. It's going to be a little different in commercial. I don't have a telematics device in my car for my personal insurance. I don't know that I've got a good reason for not doing it. Maybe because
they're annoying as hell.
Probably. I don't know. I just never really did it. But you know what? If I'm driving a school bus or I'm driving a commercial vehicle, it's no longer my choice, right? And it's all about protecting the person who I am conducting business for. And if they want to stay blind, the blind side, then don't enable the technology, right? But as far as the decision to do these things, I think I don't know if it's changed, but last I looked, I don't think there's even telematics on school buses today, for the most part.
Really?
I don't think so. It's been a few years since I looked at it, but I don't know if they put seatbelts in yet. So it's never mind telematic devices. But I think that's crazy, personally.
Yeah. What do you, without getting into, the IP of Certificial or anything like that, but are there ways where people can take an MSA that they're getting from a vendor and kind of put it into the system, and you guys kind of check it and say yes, you kind of check these boxes, or no, you're not hitting this box, or things like that? How does it kind of work?
So all of that stuff falls into what we consider our legacy support. It's interesting because there's organizations out there that basically sell it like it's the end state, like this is the new thing and the way we should all be doing business. We look at that as this is a Band-Aid until we can actually fix the problem. Because I'm of the opinion that agents shouldn't be playing paralegal and reading MSAs. I don't like the fact that agents have to read MSAs and go through contracts in order to find out what the insurance requirements are. It should be served up in a much, much more structured way. And so you can use AI to assist with that and provide that. But like I was saying earlier, those requirements that in structured data format, they exist in those vendor systems where those certs are ending up. They're just not being shared because they don't have the ability to share data. Just like the insurance industry doesn't have the ability to share data, so they put it on a COI. Well, the cert holders who have those MSAs, they don't have the ability to share data, so they put it in an MSA or send you an MSA, and then you have to decipher and go through it and figure it out. So we're in our network, we are always sending structured data requirements to the insurance agent, which gives them the ability to do a complete compliance check before sending the COI back. They know whether it's ever going to be accepted or not, right down into endorsements, exclusions.
So that data, you're collecting that data from the vendor, so to speak, with their insurance requirements, and you have them on a vendor by vendor basis.
Correct. We have all of that information via our APIs structured into our system. When a supplier enrolls with an organization to do business, it kicks off a process. It knows what the insurance requirements are based on the type of work they're doing. These systems have that level of sophistication. They just don't have the way of sharing it into the insurance agents in a way that they can then get the request, look at the coverage that the person actually has, and marry the two over each other to say, oh, you have this coverage or you do not, or you meet all of these needs or you do not. It's all done manually today. So yeah, we eliminate all of that, and it's all done through automation and through a data driven experience. But to actually answer your point more directly, we do have AI modules. We call it like our intake module that is honestly intended for all the stuff not coming through Certificial, that's still going through legacy old school channels, emails and web forms and everything else. You can funnel it in, get it into Certificial so it feels like it was on network request. And again, in due time, I look forward to no longer having to support those modules, because they are the Band-Aid I mentioned earlier to the problem. You know, you can it's a better way of doing the same old thing, but it's the same old thing at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not innovation. That's not transformation.
That's a good line. Better way of doing the same whole thing. There's a lot of tools in the industry that are kind of band-aids, right?
Indeed.
And the way you guys have kind of broken it down, I mean, even go back to your whiteboard example of like what's the actual problem? What's not the problem with today's system, right? Like, what's not the problem with today's workflow? Like, what's the actual problem? And then do we need a whole new workflow, right?
Right.
Smart.
Yeah. And it's, and when you realize you need a whole new workflow, you also realize, okay, well, this is a journey, right? Because, we're moving a mountain, right?
How do you, taking your niche segment of the market, as it pertains to COIs, but if you, were a futurist, so to speak, and somebody said, hey, Pete, how do you think AI is going to impact the insurance industry, specifically the independent agent channel, the most? Of all the tech that you've seen and all the AI application and all the agentic yada, 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 fast forward 36 months from now, you go visit a forward-thinking agency. How do you think AI is going to have the most meaningful material impact?
I think operational efficiency is going to be very high up on the list. And I think their ability to better service their clients is going to be high up on that list. I mean, those are going to be the two end results of the use of that technology, and the only purpose why I think agents would adopt it in the first place. But I do see use cases and practical, use cases in both those areas where it's helping. I think there's a little bit of I think, there may be some folks may be getting a little ahead of themselves and how much you can actually do today. But I am a firm believer, if I go a little, maybe a little further out than your timeline, I think AI is going to be in every business, in every practice, and it's going to be a game changer. It's not we will not be here in a few years talking about it the way we just referenced blockchain a few moments ago.
No, that I agree.
No chance.
How do you use it in your day-to-day?
So, on the insurance side of the house, it gets used a lot for legacy processing, like we just spoke about. The intake channels that are coming in to agents, that are still document driven, and until we can get everything through the network and served up in a better way, AI is a good use case there. Honestly, once you get it into the system, you have a really, really strong data-driven workflow. All the automation capabilities that we've built in, they're really systematic. They're not really AI-driven at that point. But then, the data and analytics aspect of what we have is tremendous too. Again, not necessarily AI, but, serving data back at the end of the day and having it so that it can be consumed by agents to really make, informed decisions. One example I always love to give is when you really understand and you're able to store all your insured's requirements, you can actually do impact analysis across that. If I'm your client and I'm looking to drop my insurance, you can actually tell me who I'm going to go out of compliance with and what MSA I'll be in breach with. I don't think many people can do that today. All right. So, that's the enablement piece of it. On the other side of the house, when you change your stakeholder position and that of a certificate holder, again, I think there's a lot we do today as far as the automation and the real-time aspect of policy data, but there's still endorsement documents. There's a lot of in the weeds documents that has never been digitized yet. And until that, we can figure out how to crack that nut, AI is a great solution too. That's what we're helping to surface up those exclusions and surface up those those potential risks that even if I have insurance, doesn't necessarily mean your claim's getting paid, right? Those details are equally important. And AI is a great use for that as well. So, where some of that human intervention comes into place that nobody wants to do, it's is where we're implementing it first, and it's proven to be really valuable. It really is.
Are there any sort of like benchmarking tools within the Certificial platform? I was just like when you said that story, like, hey, you can lower your limit, but you won't be able to work with Amazon anymore, right? Whatever it is, right? Are there tools like the opposite way where like, hey, I'm a growing trucking company, I'm trying to get bigger contracts. Like, are there ways where I can see like, hey, like you want to get to Amazon, like you're going to need to pick up $5 million in liability or $2 million isn't going to cut it anymore. Are there sort of benchmarkings within the platform that you can kind of see forward looking as well?
So all the data is there. Our ability to necessarily serve that back up into the industry is not yet, something that's in our control. But I think, one of the things that I've been excited about that I've seen that I think kind of speaks to where you're going with it is that we've been able to actually influence the way either side does business with each other. That's never been done before. I've had some sizable brokers that work with, large commercial transportation organizations who have been, sharing, COI information back for years. We're actually able to almost facilitate a conversation between and amongst these groups to get them to work a little better together, right? And I think there's a great opportunity to do what you just said as a result of seeing that actually occur. To say, hey guys, you know what? If we share a little more information, not just the specifics that you need here, but perhaps, because one of the ways these companies work is they'll say, just tell me what insurance you have. I'll tell you what jobs you're eligible for. But to your point, they don't know what they're missing. So if I was able to say, by the way, you missed these 12 jobs, and if you had these coverages, you could have gotten them. Huge.
Very cool. Yeah,
so we'll get there for sure.
Where in that example, where would they see that they missed these 12 jobs?
Well, because we're integrated into these systems, right? I would be able to enable additional API capabilities into those systems that are placing that work. And we would see, they ultimately track, they know what
like RFP type platforms and RFP type work.
It's not even that deep. It's not even that deep. Like what will end up happening, we'll take like a specific example, like a trucking company ends up inside the platform. So their insurance is there, right? Let's say they don't have reaper breakdown, right? But there's 200 jobs that require it. And they're missing out on all 200 of them as a result. Right? Like it's not an RFP. It's just that's how they serve this up in some of these platforms. They're like, I need a driver who's got the coverage to take this load on the road. If reefer breakdown is a requirement because it requires refrigeration, well, then only the suppliers whose insurance has reefer breakdown is going to be able to, will be a candidate for that job. You know what you're missing out on, right? You don't know if you missed out on 200 jobs because you don't have reefer breakdown, right? Or the ability to do that. So it's again, this is all this data that's inside these systems today that insurance industry lacks because they could be using it to sell insurance to their customers, which then gets them more work. And and it's like, I spent a little bit more on insurance and I got 200 more jobs. Like this is the stuff that we have to, this is the enablement. This is where the break between these industries is causing so much unnecessary pain and loss when it comes to opportunity.
I'm curious to know if, like, big picture, long term, within these systems, it basically says, hey, here are these 200 jobs are available. If that would be something that would be meaningful in the trustedchoice.com platform, where we're kind of building this peer-to-peer referral opportunity network where, hey, here's an opportunity. Here's a trucking company that's, looking for a particular job. But again, that's more insurance-based.
It all depends, I'll let me tell you where I always saw something like a trusted choice being an opportunity, right? And before I go there, I'll say quickly, one of the things that we pride ourselves on and we take very, very seriously is protecting agents' book of business. I never, ever want an agent to lose a client because somebody else is aware that they lack a coverage or something like that. Get odd requests for access to these kind of things, cut it off at the, immediately. And that's something that we take very, very, very seriously in all we do, even when an insured has multiple agents that they obtain insurance from. I was also blown away how often that happens. I mean, I knew it occurred, but, I have ridiculous amount of examples of people, deal with 4 brokers to get their insurance. It's like, I mean, it's like you have 4 lines of business. You got to go to someone different for every one of them. It's like, but to each his own. Nonetheless,
What's the reason behind that?
it might be my workers' comp is better off coming from the state. I get this great BOP policy from this local agency over here, and Progressive or someone has got the best auto. So next thing you know, you're spread out across 3 different agents and brokers, and sounds good when you think about paying your bills every month or just having that flexibility. But then when you need a COI and you realize you got to create 3 of them for every one request, is where our worlds come together. And I won't go down that soapbox, but we have multi-agent support in our system for self-servicing in those scenarios, where you could actually have all 3 of your agents on the Certificial platform, and in the system in one workflow will create all 3 COIs. So you don't end up having to go to 3 client portals, right? And so that's a real thing that we solve for. But I do want to go back to the point you were making that I almost lost my train of thought on. You had a question and it was good, Michael. What did you say before?
I don't know. I'm a flash in the pan. It came and it went.
That was good though. I wanted to double click on that too. But I think you were talking about trusted choice. And when we have agents on the platform, there's lines of business that come in that the insured doesn't have, and the agent has no interest in writing. Cyber is a good example. Some people want to stay the hell away from cyber, right? Like, I'm not writing that line of business. And if they're not writing it and they need it and they don't have it, well, then why not put it on the market?
Right. And get some benefit from it. One of the, cutesy taglines, but we really mean it as like a real thesis, is we want to empower the agents to stop saying no. To your example, right? If that comes in and they don't write it, tell your insured, we can handle it. We're part of the Momentum TrustedChoice.com peer-to-peer network. I've got a trusted agent who I know and I work with, and I know where he lives, that will write that line of business. Right. I'll get a little bit of the commission, as opposed to just saying, no, sorry, can't help you, go elsewhere.
Right. Yep. This is where all the tech comes together, right?
This is where,
beautiful.
Again, for the first time, it all comes together. Yep. What's the onboarding process like? If an agent wants to go live with Certificial, how heavy is the lift? How much training do they have to go through? How much technical integration is required? Is it easy? Is it hard?
Yeah, so it's based on the current state of the agency. So if they're a Momentum agent, I don't think you can make it a lot easier. Right, it's a click of a button to enable an integration. We do hands-on training with everybody who comes into the system. So it's going to be a little bit different. We definitely look at workflows and certain things slightly different because it's what enables the automation capability. So it's a little bit of a learning curve there, but nothing that I think is foreign or requires too much time and effort. But it's there. Outside of that, that's pretty much all it takes, right? Most agency management systems, we have a pretty good onboarding process with. Again, some have made it just incredibly simple for folks to get in and enable. Others might be a few step process, And again, if you're, because we have individuals who have homegrown systems, right? And when you're doing an integration, it's true. I mean, we have carriers and large brokers who built their own applications and, their own policy admin systems and such. And when that happens, even that lift isn't that bad. Yes, you have to take on some API work and build it out, but it tends to be about a 3-month journey to get somebody live, even in that type of scenario.
If you could go back, I know this is such a cliche question, but I find it an interesting one. If you can go back to the day you formed Certificial and you could tell yourself something, what would that be?
It's a good one. I would tell myself something. What would it be? Honestly, it probably would be to just get ahead of that onboarding and that change management process a little bit better. I just mentioned it's not that big of a lift, but it's something that I didn't recognize how important and how much our involvement would really be necessary there. When we first brought on our first agencies, we didn't take the time to really get into the weeds of their workflows, to understand what they did and how different would it be. And because it's not just training someone how to use your system, it's training them how to do what they need to do in your system. Right. And, and I learned that. I was like, okay, so, you guys have different needs. You have different needs. So as your training actually changes, it's not this is the training session, you know what I mean? And everybody gets the same thing. The way we train agents and brokers, it's pretty tailored. It's like first, it's like a show and tell. It's like first, show me what you do. Then I'll show you how to recreate the importance of your workflows in the system. And not only that, guide you to say, please don't ever do that again. Do it this way now, because if you do that, like, and I say it to agents, brokers all the time, like the second you're putting static data in some description of operations, please stop yourself and call me, because you're breaking the automation. Like everything's got to be data driven. So it's really like, I don't know that that's necessarily something I didn't know. I don't think, but I do think it's something that I didn't realize how important it was. And I wish a little early on I would have equipped, the team to be prepared for that, but now it's ingrained in what we do from an onboarding process.
It's funny. If I were to go back to like when I launched Insurance Gig and would have said one piece of advice I give myself, it's like, don't underestimate how difficult it's going to be to get people to change. They'll tell you they're going to change and they're going to sign up. It's funny. I just saw a quote the other day. People hate change until the pain of not changing is worse than change itself.
That's a good line. Sad but true, man.
I think that's every InsurTech who's come out in the last 5-10 years has probably had the same answer, right? I think change management has been the biggest issue for every InsurTech across whatever kind of thing you're getting into, right? It's some of these processes have been ingrained for. You go down to the South, they've been ingrained for generations, right? I mean, you have like multi-generation agencies who have been doing things for 3 generations the same exact way. And to just say tomorrow, even if objectively your way is better, it's hard to get them to make that jump. I think change management is a huge part of the whole thing.
There's components in our system today that show just how blinded I was by that. Because there is no button inside Certificial that says create COI. It says share policy. Because I'm going, the COI is not important, right? Like it's there, but what really we're doing is we're sharing data, right? We're sharing policies with another person, creating a digital connection. And even the label of that button is sometimes too much of a change, so they don't for someone to wrap their head around, right? It's like, I can't figure out the system. Where's the create COI button, And it's logical, it makes sense, and it's when you realize you're getting a little too far ahead of yourself,
That's a great point.
Well, we're at the 1 hour mark, which is our time. Pete, I really appreciate your time and the partnership. We had to work for it. It's been years of starts and stops and really getting there. And, I think, to both of us, like for really persevering. And I think at the end of the day, the independent agent will benefit from this collaboration. And it's available to you, and all Momentum users, it's free. If you're not a Momentum user and you want an easy integration, reach out. We could gladly make it work. But these two systems like really sync, and it's a massive time suck, and it's just one of the many ways that we bring value to the independent agent. And Pete, I always enjoy chilling and hanging out and catching up, and like really from the very beginning, you were one of the first partners that we worked with, and I can't thank you enough.
Likewise, man. I appreciate that, Michael, and thank you for what you guys have built. I think it's tremendous. I think Momentum agents, to your point, will benefit. Maybe we do a little follow up, do a little webinar, get in front of them, show them some of the power of the system that you guys enabled it for them, right? It's there, it's available, and I think there's a lot of great things to come of it. So yeah, this is it's going to be a good second half of the year as we really push that into further adoption. But we've had tremendous adoption already, even in the short period of time that it's been available. So very excited. Appreciate you guys having me today and appreciate the continued partnership. I really do.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Insurance Technology Amplified. Be sure to stay connected and up to date by following Momentum AMP on all social networks. For show notes, resources, and details on upcoming episodes, visit our podcast page at momentumamp.com/podcast. We look forward to having you join us next time. Take care and see you soon.